would have set interest rates that low. If it wasn't for government guarantees through Freddie and Fannie, people never could have borrowed all that money without government guarantees. If it wasn't for legislation and government pressure to make certain types of loans, if it wasn't for a Fed chairman, Alan Greenspan, who let Wall Street believe that he had their back, if anything went wrong, he was there with a green pen foot. Unfortunately, it was true. Look at all the bailing. Goldman Sachs now just is passing out record bonuses this year. Goldman would have gone bankrupt if it wasn't for government bailout money. General Electric would have gone bankrupt if it wasn't for... There are a lot of huge companies, named companies, that would have gone bankrupt had the government not bailed them out. So unfortunately, they were all reckless. And they didn't have to suffer because the government bailed them out. And that's the moral hazard that we've set up. I mean, if you're going to take risk, you have to be punished if it doesn't work out. I mean, you had people that were putting money in treasuries because they didn't want to take risk. Meanwhile, the people who did the people who were taking risk ended up with a much better return, and they didn't have to suffer any adverse consequence when their bad bets went south. But anyway, I want to take time for some questions. But so the problem is going to be that the free market had got such a bad reputation, especially with George Bush, trying to pretend. He said we have to abandon capitalism to save it. The problem, he abandoned it when he took the oath of office. So people associate capitalism with Bush, capitalism with the failures that are actually failures of government. So it's going to be hard. So somebody needs to be in the Senate to really remind everybody exactly why the nation was so prosperous. And when the problems first emerged, it was the first thing they could think of, was, yes, we're all capitalists, but this is an emergency. They said, this is no time for principle. We need to take action. As if you abandon your principles the minute things get difficult. As if capitalism only works in good times, but in bad times you need socialism. The reality is, it's in good times where you can actually afford a little socialism. It's not a good thing. But at least if you're prosperous, you can afford the extra waste, the extra government. It's during tough times when capitalism is needed most. If we're going to turn this situation around, we have to fully embrace it. We can't pretend that things are so bad that we have to abandon capitalism and turn to socialism, because that is what is going to take a bad situation and make it horrific. But anyway, hopefully, if I can win this Senate seat, maybe you guys can help me do that. There'll be one voice of reason in the United States Senate, and maybe we won't take that final that final fork on the road to serfdom. Anyway, thanks everybody. Yes, in the white shirt.
Yeah, I got a question. Do you think that Paulson and Greenspan and all those people, are they incompetent, or are they lying about all this?
Well, first of all, look at their motivation. All these guys that are advising the president, who advised President Bush, they're all from Wall Street, and so they see stuff. They see everything from their perspective, and their perspective is what's good for Wall Street is good for the country. And that's often not the case. Their goal is, how do we get more money to my friends that still work at Goldman Sachs, and Wall Street is certainly benefiting dramatically. Look at all the money that has been made by investment bankers and hedge funds because of this monetary policy. Because remember, the way that new money is introduced into the economy is through the banking system. Right? These banks get access to the money first, and they take it and they speculate with it. And of course, when the government is debasing money, asset prices go up because you're diminishing the value of money. In many cases, it's not that the assets are more valuable, it's just the money that we're pricing it in is less valuable. But they take that cheap money and they lever it up. and they can make an extraordinary amount of money. But they're not helping the economy. They're hurting the economy. They're just delivering inflation to the economy, and they're producing nothing. You know, Wall Street's they're not making anything over there. You know, they're just, and a lot of the money that Wall Street is making is basically the purchasing power that the rest of the country is losing. The reason so many people are working so hard for less, the reason, it takes 2 wage earners to support a family, whereas, not too long ago it only took 1. The reason that people can't retire, the reason that people are loaded up with debt, is because all the money is going to Wall Street. And so a lot of it is just their own self-interest, their own perspective. And of course, I think they've convinced the politicians, because all the politicians, they watch the polls and then they watch the stock market. And they think that it's their job to keep the stock market going up, so they have to keep Wall Street happy. Because a lot of times, the success or failure of the economy is measured by the level of the stock market. But that's wrong. I mean, the reality is the stock market is too high. Asset prices are too high. Home prices are too high. If home prices and stock prices come down, that's not failure, that's success. We're helping to get an equilibrium. The problem is when assets are mispriced, it distorts the economy. And we need to remove the distortion. We're never going to solve these problems until we have efficient pricing in markets. But the politicians are looking at a different objective. How do we keep the stock market going up? Because unfortunately, if we did the right thing, if the government pursued my policies, stock prices would fall and real estate prices would fall. Nobody sees that as a solution. But unfortunately, it is. Yeah.
Do you anticipate that the government might try to enact dramatic wage and price controls? And
I don't think they'll actually have to enact wage controls, because I don't think wages are going anywhere. But I think prices are. And wages are prices. They're the price of labor. But with so many people unemployed, it's going to be hard for workers to get much higher wages. But it's not going to be hard for prices to go up. And a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that, well, if wages can't go up, then prices can't go up. They're wrong. They're totally wrong. They're different prices. But remember, a lot of the stuff that we make, that we consume, is imported. And so if our wages aren't going up, but the dollar's going down, that means everybody else's wages are going up in dollar terms, and they can now afford all the things, even though we can't. And of course, there are a lot of things that we produce that we can export. And so if the dollar is losing value as a result of inflation, there are a lot of products that American manufacturers or American farmers or whoever are selling in America that they're going to try to export. And as exports go up, that diminishes the supply of goods for Americans. So even though demand is falling, supply is falling. And so prices can still rise. People who think you can't have inflation with high unemployment don't know anything about inflation or employment. Because in general, what keeps prices down and what makes them fall is productive people. Lots of people employed. Lots of people making things. Because under a market economy, the more productive you are, and you see these things. Look at cell phones and laptop computers and plasma TVs. All these things get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper because of productivity. Because we're making more stuff. So it has nothing to do with the number of people who have jobs. And if the government is going to print money, if we're all unemployed, they can't print a limitless amount of money just because we're not working. In fact, if we were working and producing things, they could print a little bit more. So actually, the more unemployment there is, the easier it is to create inflation, or at least the easier it is for prices to rise when the government creates inflation. Yeah.
My question is this. Whereas the Federal Reserve of the United States, they have a dual mandate to combat inflation and to promote growth, correct? Whereas other economies such as Europe, the European Central Bank is strictly price stability. They have no fiscal.
Yeah, I mean the whole concept of the dual mandate is wrong, because the way the Federal Reserve tries to promote growth is by creating inflation, because that's the only thing it can do. Right? The Federal Reserve, all they can do is print money, or they can add money to circulation or take it out. So that's the only tool they have, right? They manipulate it through interest rates or open market operations, but the Fed just decides how much inflation to create. And so when they're trying to fight unemployment, they're doing it by creating inflation.